Hello everybody. Thanks for joining. We are going to be finishing up these assets, rendering, detailing. Some people really like detailing because then you can just like put on headphones and put on a podcast and just chill out. I think concept phase is probably my favorite, but I like detailing in a totally different way because concepting you have to really think about your execution and like plan your whole process and everything. And so it's like really fun to mess around in that early stage, especially because it's like 0 to 50% of the work, maybe even sometimes like 60 or 70, right? The detailing is really fun because then you don't have to stress out about what you're making. You just kind of noodle and add little Easter eggs and wear and tear and things like that. I started with like a very universal basic asset that has a couple different kinds of materials and stuff because I want to set the tone for how I'm going to do everything here. And picking something not too big is really important, but also not too small. When working on Topia art, since I like to work at resolution, the way it's going to be displayed, it looks like pixel art kind of in like a weird way, just with like extra pixels to alias. Some people are a little like, oh, I wish I could have more detail, and you totally can, and then just like scale your assets down. But I like working at resolution. That way my users and the people who use my own assets and stuff, including myself, don't have to worry about scaling things correctly or incorrectly. You just drop it in and boom, there it is. It just works. Yeah, we're doing details, we're doing rendering, we're doing color. It's not gonna look like Topia assets. It's gonna look like its own thing. Its own thing. You don't know me. You're not my dad. Son, I didn't come all the way to this country for you to be your own thing. Whenever I make anything, I zoom in and out all the time because you don't want to get tunnel vision because you're working on these things that are like I'm working at this thing at like screen res, right? Like this. But it's gonna be, this document is 1080p, so this document is how big it's going to show up on your desktop. The cameras will be like this big or whatever. You're going to have your little dock, and more cams. And then, yeah, so this table is like really tiny, so you don't want to just sit here and be like this all the time. So you'll notice I'm probably going to be doing this a lot. I really like when I'm doing wood pieces to add these little tiny nooks. It really, again, it highlights the individual piece. It helps the whole thing feel a little more chonky, you know. And I'd actually go an extra step and really freaking emphasize that chonkster right there. Oh, look at that chonkster. I have a cat now, so I'm obsessed with saying that word. He's not a chonkster, but I kind of almost wish he was, just so that I have the excuse to say it more often. A little more orange. The brightness just a tad. See what that looks like. It's not gonna look good. It's all right because I can paint it first and then do a hue sat later. So don't, if you're having like color anxiety, which I have all the time, just fill it with whatever color. It doesn't really matter, and then go in and do a hue sat later, which is up here. You can do a hue saturation brightness, and you can adjust just real quick. You can kind of just adjust whatever you want. The other thing that I really like to do is, instead of that, I make a clipping mask on top. So all of the work that you do on this clipping mask is only going to apply to that layer. So for example, what does that look like? If I do this squiggle, it goes over everything. Oh, that actually looks really cool. I like that color combo. If I do a clipping mask, it only applies to the brown thing below it. And so I use this as a way to like get super loosey-goosey without worrying about, you know, my paint kind of spreading everywhere. But you can also just paint bucket the whole thing and then clipping mask that one spot, and then there you go. I'm really lazy with my colors. Like most people are like, oh, you're supposed to use science to do this and blah blah blah, and I'm like, I know, I studied that stuff, but I kind of just want my shadows to be a shadow color and my lighting to be a lighting color. So whenever I'm doing an outdoor scene, I just have this like super generic blue that I use, and I put the layer on multiply. I think I put it on multiply. Yeah, I put it on multiply, and I just fill in, and it plays with the color that it's sitting on top of. And so, since I have a clipping mask, it's not getting out here. It's not bleeding out to the edge. But this is usually my shadow. And then my lighting is this like kind of light thing. It's also on a clipping mask. It's probably soft light. Or soft light. There it is. And the reason I'm not really particularly worried about this color not being the right color is because, again, I can change this whenever I want. It's just on a clipping mask, and it's not perma. Nothing's permanent here. I like working non-destructively, as you would say, which is also one of the reasons why I love digital art, because you can play around with it and change it. So you don't have to worry about like, oh man, I gotta freaking put down the new paint. I gotta get my right brush. I gotta wash everything off and make sure okay, now new layer, reset. You know, there's none of that. There's straight up just like, ooh, time to change the color of this thing. Oh, look, all the lighting stays. Wow, look at that. Actually, that looks great. I might run with red wood. Dude, I don't know my woods. Oh, that's the other embarrassing thing. So I was like a terrain artist for years, and environment artist, and I had to like learn about tons of trees and rocks and all this stuff. Except I never learned the words for them. So I just like would refer to them as specific of their visual features, like, yeah, the tree that has the needle things that fall, or like the ones with the whoosh leaves that are like, they look like Spock's hands or something. I couldn't wrap my brain around the correct terminology like ever. It was very embarrassing. But then again, pretty much everybody else was in the same boat, so hashtag not my fault. Oh man, what should these little table legs look like? Should they be round little nubs? I think they should be cylinders. They just go straight down. But I kind of like when things go chonk like outwards, because it just has that extra little angled personality. Some people don't. Some people think this is BS. I personally think it helps a lot because it gives me a way of looking at my stuff in a new way. So when you look at your art all the time, you're probably going to get tunnel vision, and it's fine. That's just how brain work. You get used to... That's how brain work. You get used to seeing the thing you've been looking at for a while. And so you end up forgetting about a lot of stuff, or just ignoring a lot of things. Not because you're purposely ignoring it, but just because you don't really see it. And so the best way to go get about it is just hit this button, flip horizontal, boop! And now you're looking at everything you made in a totally reversed stance. So you start to notice the other details a little bit more. And you can paint in this form for a while, you know, hang out, and then just when you're done, you just flip canvas again. And so a lot of times I'll just sit here and flip my canvas like constantly, just to be like, what am I missing? What am I missing? It's like how when you show someone your art and just to get a fresh perspective, it's like getting that free fresh perspective, but just for yourself. You just sit here and think. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of canvas rotating. And so a lot of the time, you're not even actually painting something or doing something, like you're just doing this. You're just tumbling the canvas around because your brain is actively like trying to think of the next step, the next brushstroke you do, right? It counts as progress, right? Because visually you're thinking like, oh man, this is progress. This is a thing being made whenever you have a brushstroke, or it's an idea being fleshed out. But doing this and like thinking about your asset is just as impactful and just as important. If you went in your day as an artist and you tracked the amount of time that you weren't putting pen or pencil or stylus or whatever to screen, you probably find that you're only actually physically making a thing for like 2 hours for every 8 hours. Maybe. Because most of the time you're just doing this, or you're like doing a thing and undoing it, or like beveling a thing and unbeveling, or like changing a value, or, you know, you're not, it's not a time lapse of just like, you know, especially when you're working on production stuff a lot of time. But don't beat yourself up about it. It's fine. It's all part of the process, right? It's like when you bill for time, if you're a freelancer, you bill for experience and not necessarily for each brushstroke that you're putting down in the literal time that you're putting into the thing. Musubi is like the greatest food ever created by man. There should be musubi sommeliers. I'm surprised there aren't. There probably already are. I'm just not cultured enough. But yeah, so look at all these layers we can now play with because they're all separated digitally. Oh, digital art's so cool, Hayden. Yeah, I know. Wow. I think the reason why I'm so like trying not to offend people with my love for digital art is I had this teacher in school, terrible school by the way. I had this teacher that was like, digital is the devil, even though we were going to a digital arts school. She was like, digital is like the devil, and you don't, it's just a bunch of shortcuts, and you all aren't gonna learn the real right way to do things. And for the most part, she was right. A lot of people use digital as a crutch because they have trouble doing line art or drawing or whatever the heck, or drawing perspective. I'm out here being like, well, what's the problem with the crutch as long as it gets you to make art at all, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to art, especially with like painting. You go to an art store and you ask like, what's the right thing for me, and they're gonna be like, well, you got to make sure you got your number 18 pencil, and you got to have your this kind of canvas and your watercolor, but don't use that kind of watercolor because it's gonna get all messed, blah, 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 right? Is so much that sometimes it seems overwhelming, and that's why I think it's okay if digital art is a crutch. Sometimes you need a crutch to get to the next thing. I mean, she was a great artist, but she just really was not a super fan of the fact that all of us, we were just like really bad artists. We were like fresh out of high school. Some of us were like, yeah, we're only really going here because video games, or like because we needed to do something. Not a lot of us were like, yeah, art is my calling. And so this poor art teacher is like, this angry art teacher is like, I'm teaching this room full of kids who like don't give a shit about the craft. And we were like, we don't even know what the craft is. But actually, my school is so bad that I went to, my art school, they actually are shutting down as we speak. They also forgot to sign my diploma. They forgot a lot of things. It's not to say art school is like bad, it's just my art school is bad. Like, we had to teach ourselves. We had to, like, our graduating class of 13 people, we would like study alone together and like really push each other, Just doing my little pillow cushions. Oh, this is gonna look so cute, yo. This is gonna look heckin' cute. Oh, I can feel it. It kind of looks like a little cute cake. I'm gonna put a little button in the middle. Oh, look at this button. Yo, look at that button. Oh. Okay. I've noticed that it helps a lot if you think of your outline as a supporting factor rather than the thing carrying all the weight. If you are making a Topia space, it's important to define your boundaries and tell people why they should be in their space, and make it less interesting for them to wander. Give them a reason to stay inside. But you can do that with like rail guards or like fences, right? And this isn't to say people should, it's not going to stop them from going out, but it's going to tell them that the more interesting things are happening inside the space. So I like to put trees or objects or like buildings. I like to put a lot of my buildings on the outside. Vertical buildings are a great way of taking up tons of landmass, right? Same with like a truck. You could put like a truck. But a lot of things to just define where everything is taking place, because otherwise they're just gonna like meander off, right? Like even roads. You can have roads. Roads help, but roads are just they're just one piece of the overall puzzle of keeping your audience in the place you want them to be. If they don't know where they're supposed to be, that's on you as a world designer. Give them no room for question. Make it so easy to tell where they're supposed to go that they feel like it was their idea to go in the right path. When you want to tell them that they're not supposed to go somewhere, you need to make your boundaries really detailed and fun to look at, but not important enough to look at that it makes someone want to like explore past it or go through it, right? So you have to imply a world outside that is just not interesting. Putting a light right above the doorway is a really good way, or like a red light, like a spotlight, is a good way of like saying like, hey, this is the door you're supposed to take. Oh, and the whole environment's like brown, and then it catches your eye. It is valid of a way of making you notice the thing, but it doesn't specifically scream, this is where you're supposed to go, unless you've played a video game before, because otherwise it just looks like a red light. Like instinctively, humans aren't like, oh, there's a clearing in the forest with light coming down on that spot. My survival mechanic tells me to go to that spot. That's not how our brains work. This is totally a fallacy, but it does help at least get attention. Self-care boundaries, yeah. Balancing with flowing inspiration. Yeah, because a lot of times your body's like, if I put the brush down right now, I'm going to lose it forever. Until you realize that if you have the ability to put it to like make the thing that you're making right now, it doesn't mean you're not going to be able to make it in the morning. Like you're still going to be you. You're the person behind the thing that's being made. So it's not going to be lost into the ether, right? Or sometimes I'll even just be like, oh, you know what? I'll compromise and I'll just write it down. And then when I get back to it in the morning on the next day, I'll be like, I'll literally pick up the inspiration where I left off and be like, oh, that's what I was so jazzed about. And it's fine. But that's my way of getting around it. Everyone has their own way. Topia pro tip, real quick, is to make sure that all of my colors and my palette across the whole kit is just I want them to align really well. I want everything to look like it belongs in the same scene, right? They're not just colors for the sake of colors, just as they're not assets just for the sake of adding more assets. Like we can sit here and make as many assets as we want, but I think having an intention with what you're making sometimes is more important than the amount of stuff you're making, right? How are these pipes gonna go together? I'll just show that they're kind of like Lincoln logged on top of each other. Those little details are fun. Boop, little Lincoln log. Showing how things are conjoined. I'm gonna probably put little bolts here too. Just so there's something to look at. And it doesn't make sense to even have bolts here. But I just like the breakup of the silhouette. There's a metal band bolted on the edge. Sure. And then we can just... Oh, like it was a wheel? Oh, that'd be so cool if the chandelier was a wheel. Oh my god. If the chandelier is a wheel that's just being held up. Oh, that's what we're doing now. We gotta do that now. Make this lighting on this stuff is just gonna make this candle look a little more girthy and help that shape really shine. Yeah, so a lot of people like painting this stuff up straight up, right? They like just taking the color and painting on the canvas and that's it. But because I have anxiety around that kind of like permanence, I like toggling everything on layer. So this is my shadow layer, right? And then this is my highlight layer. It's really subtle. It's hard to see maybe on stream. But yeah, and those things combined along with the base color make for like, oh, look at that. Boom. Look at that. Boom. Oh my god, look how cute this is. I can't get over it, dog. Yeah, let me group this really quick. Let me duplicate. Let me flatten. Move it below. And then I'm going to check this magic out. I'm going to turn down the brightness all the way. And now it looks like your Topia is walking underneath an object. And because it's a second layer, it would apply to other things. I use symmetry tools. sometimes if I'm working on like a really big thing that I definitely don't want to draw both sides of. But with smaller things, it's kind of nice not having the symmetry on, TBH. Although I'm gonna warp this side a little bit because of my left to right side bias. So I'm just gonna take this, I'm gonna warp, boop. The downside of warping, by the way, is your pixels start looking weird. So now they just look like this. But you want to make sure your lines are clean, so you're probably gonna have to go in and do a little touch up to make it not as smoochy when you do kind of edits like this. Oh, does it look good like this? Oh, okay, check this out. This is cheating. Basically dupe this barrel, but we're just going to flip it straight up. Boom, barrel, boom. Look at that. And now we just duplicate it around. So the lighting is going to be super unique in that it's going to have shadows casting in those crevices as well as under here and here and here. And it's going to make the lighting on this barrel and these barrels below feel totally unique from the ones on top. So it's not, so if you're trying to pop, remember, I want to make these assets big enough so they don't have to populate the space too much. They can just dump this thing there and boom, it's good. Yeah, art smarter, not harder. So yes, we get the win with the duplication, but we have to remember it's going to look really good if we take that next level step of polish and just try to tie it all together with its own unique set of lighting. Oh, I forgot about the pegs. I can't start without doing the pegs, dude. I got to do the pegs real quick. The pegs are really, I was looking forward to the pegs because it gives us another way of storytelling and showing that, hey, these barrels are being held up by something. They're not just like freestanding barrels, you know? Some people like working in layers like me. A lot of people don't like working in layers. It's totally against like totally personal preference. It's not a huge deal either way. I will say it's easy to get lost in your layers sometimes if you put too much into micromanaging. If you overuse layers and it becomes the point where you're trying to navigate your own document, like which layer did I put the thing on, then maybe you need to think about why you're using your layers. You know, this is all coming up live, real time. Don't really know the rules, so it's fun defining the rules as we go through. But these things take time, and a lot of people don't really, sometimes they don't understand or they don't know what you're getting into, but the time part of it is just, it's just part of it. It's nice. Lean into it. Don't be so impatient, you know? You don't gotta be on the clock, because at the end of the day, the final product is the thing people are gonna say. There's this thing Nintendo said, Nintendo as a company, not Nintendo, but like, you know, one of the execs or whatever, they were like, if you take the time to polish a game, it'll be great when it comes out, but if you don't, it'll come out and forever be like broken or something. So just, you know, take your time. Let's see, what should I do next? I'm gonna do this wall because I feel like it. You're not my dad. You don't know me. The other thing we can do is play with these shadows, but I don't want to get too carried away with, again, with unique details, because it's only gonna stand to make it really almost like repeated like too much. Pull some in here. It's a lot of pushing and pulling to get the detail that you really want. And it's okay to like undo and figure it out and blah, blah, blah. Just make mistakes as fast as you can so that you're continuing to push through the drawing. Fail faster, as some would say. I think I'm actually going to do the plaster on its own thing. I'm going to take this color. I'm just going to paint it right under. So we do the plaster underneath, and I don't have to worry about bleeding. I can just give it its own lighting properties without worrying about it affecting if I have to do some more post later. Oh, that is so freaking cool. Check that out. That feels good. That feels so good. Oh my god. This is the best part. This is the best part of like setting up your layers properly. If that's what you want. Because then you can just like make these broad strokes without worrying too much about where they're going. You're just here to vibe. You're just here to throw down paint, you know? Playing with lighting is so fun, dude. If anyone doesn't know what ambient occlusion is, it's actually the principle of lighting for all the stock Topia assets, the chalk or the pencil drawings, because it doesn't actually have a defined lighting. It's just the crevices and anything that's not facing a top area. So it's everything it's just showing where light is being occluded. So it's not actually a shadow. So like if you have an angle that's kind of like this corner of it is going to be occluded, so it's going to be darker, whereas up here it's going to be brighter because it's away from that crevice, you know, as it travels up. And it makes it easier than thinking about like, oh, there's spotlight, oh, here's a cast shadow. It's just all ambient. So I like putting in a little bit of ambient occlusion just generally in everything that I make, and it really helps cement that a surface is next to another surface, you know? Just that tiny little bit helps. Like, just, oh, look at that. Oh, it's a difference. Feels good. Feels good, man. Clap. I want this wall to have... I want the plaster to speak. I want it to feel like a plaster. So I think I'm going to have to go in here and just draw little nicks. But now it looks like skin. Maybe... out of sheer curiosity. I'm still concerned about the repetitive nature of these pieces. But we'll see. Man, I'm so happy with that. That looks so dope. Because I don't want people to notice it unless they're really looking at it. It's plaster. It's supposed to be flat. So now all of our stuff is flattened. Let's make a little vignette to be like, oh, this is actually something I try to do even when I'm making the process of stuff, because it reminds you that all these assets are going to be going together, right? It's not just one way of making yourself excited that you've achieved a milestone. It helps you make sure you're on the right track with kind of everything. And then I will post that later for socials. But look at that! That's what we made today. How freaking cool is that? Oh my god. I'm really excited. Oh man, I'm so excited about it. Alrighty. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate the patience. Excited to keep crushing all these assets next week. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. 4 hours minimum. Can go over. Trying to stick to the schedule though. Follow us on socials. Hit the buttons. Follows are appreciated. Same with me personally. Follow my Instagram or my own channel on Twitch with the name below. Alrighty. Later, gamers.